Have you ever been using VLOOKUP but didn't know how to incorporate multiple criteria either on the search key side and or on the data side? In today's video, I'm going to show you how to do just that. So first, I'm going to walk you through 4 different scenarios, and I'm going to show you the formula for each. And then we're going to circle back around and go into that formula in more detail so you're well equipped for whatever scenario that you are facing. So let's go ahead and start with this first one. So first of all, with this data set, it probably looks repetitive, and it is, but I wanted to show the different scenarios that we're going to walk through. And so I will show and hide the columns to reflect the scenario that I'm demonstrating. So for example, searching one column with 2 keys. So in this case, I'm using the scenario that we have a data set that looks something like this. And so if we're searching for James and Anderson in a column that those are combined, then we're going to use a formula like this. And so what we have here is B3, which is James, C3, which is Anderson, and then we're searching in I, which is the name column, and returning J by referring to column number 2. And so we're using these ampersands, and then we're using a space in between because in this name there is a space. So I'll go into that more detail when we circle back around, but I will show you each formula as we go. So next, we're going to flip-flop, and I'm going to now hide this column. And so now, as example, we're searching for the full name, James Anderson, when we have the first and last names split. And so in this case, we're going to reverse it. And so here, we're just looking at one cell for our key, and then we're using what's called an array literal to combine our G and H columns. So again, that looks similar, right? We have our ampersands and our space, but we're doing an entire column instead of a single cell. And then again, we combine it with our result column, and then we can return that. And then next, we're searching 2 columns with 2 keys, which our data set will look the same. And one thing to keep in mind here is if you're returning a number, like a sum instead of text, you can use sum ifs, and it makes it very easy to do multiple columns with multiple keys. But in this case, we're looking at returning something like text, and you can't use those sum ifs in this case. So basically what we're doing here is just a combo of these first 2. So in this first one, we combined our keys. The second one, we combined our results. And so in this one, we're searching 2 columns with 2 keys. We're combining our search and our results. And so this looks a little different because we're not doing a space, but I will show you in a minute why that's the case. All right, and so our final one is searching one column with 2 keys. And so in this case, I want to showcase something slightly different. And so in this case, we have a date and a text, and then we're searching a column that has that all combined in a string. And so what we're doing here is a special concatenation where I'm turning that date into a specific type of string, followed by the name there. And then again, we're searching our column F and returning that column J. So we're looking for James Anderson in this where it's combined. And so what we're doing here is we're combining these. So one thing that's helpful in these kinds of scenarios is build those concatenations on their own first. And it helps you to see if you're making any obvious errors. And so in this case, what we're doing is we're taking that first cell, B3, then we're using ampersand, which is a way to combine different cells or strings with each other. And then we can put it together into one full string. So we're using a space because these names have a space in the middle. You could also, if you had last and first, for example, in some cases that's like Anderson, Amelia, and so forth, you could flip this around. We could do C and B, and then you can see it's James Anderson with that comma and space. So you can adjust this as needed for your use case, but in this case, we just have first and last name. And so once I combine this, now I can search for this in this column over here. And so that's exactly what we do. We do a standard VLOOKUP with our modified search key, and then we just search in I and J. And so with VLOOKUP, and I have a different tutorial on this, I'll link in the description below, but in VLOOKUP, in our search range, the first column is what it's going to search in. So in this case, I, because that's our first column. And then we can determine which column to return by our column index. So our range and then our index is the column to return. And so in this case, I say 2. So we start with our first one. So in this case, I, and then we count over. So 1 and 2. And then we get our result. And then false in VLOOKUP is just an exact match, which is what we're going to use in all these scenarios. All right, so let's go to our next one. And so this is going to be very similar, but we're just flipping something around. So instead of concatenating our search key, because we have it combined here, and so let me set up our data. There we go. So we're searching for James Anderson, but it is split in our data. And so as we look here, our search key is fine, but we need to do something with our results. And so this is called an array literal. And so let me pull out of here. And because I don't have room over here, I'm going to go to this side, come up here, and then I'm going to add it right here. So I'm going to add an equals before it. And then I need to wrap this in an array formula so that way it displays correctly. And then there we go. So there's our name, and there is that rep. So what's happening here is just like in this first one where we combined with those ampersands, we're doing the same thing over here. So we have our G column, which is our first name, and then ampersand, and then we use our double quotes and a space. That gives us a space in what we're rendering here, and another ampersand, and then our second column. And then in this array to literal, because what it's doing here, as you can tell, is making its own data set, right? Its own table. And so in this, when you use a comma, it's giving you another column. And so we have one column, comma, another column. And so we could add another one here as well. So we could add, for example, E, 2, 3E. And then do we have anything in E? Nope, let me do F. So F, and then you can see that point up there as well. So this actually allows us to do a custom array in whatever order we want. So this is what we're looking for in here. And so one thing you may notice is over here, the array formula is directly around our curly braces and our array literal. In this case, we have it outside of the VLOOKUP. So one thing is you can choose either way. So array formula will apply it to anything inside. So if we don't need it in the VLOOKUP itself, we could put it here, and that still works. And so you can see that looks a little different. This part now looks the same as our working one over here. And then the rest of our VLOOKUP should look familiar to what we just did. Here's our search key from James Anderson. Now we have our custom table. And then again, we're returning 2, because in this case, our G and H, even though technically I is between them, we're not including it in our table, as you can see over here. So we can refer to 2 instead of 3. So we don't need this any longer. And obviously it's not referring to it in here. We're actually building it into the formula, which is an awesome, cool way to be able to build functions. All right, so let's go to our next one. And so this one, we're basically combining the two methods we just used. So on our first one, we combined our search key. And in this case, we use a space in between. And this one, we did the same thing with our results. And again, putting space in between. Now in this one, if you look, there is no space. We just have an ampersand. And the reason why is because we're combining both of them. And so since there's not natively a space in either one, we can just combine it without a space. Now we could add a space here and come over here and add a space again, and it works again, but there's not really a reason to do this in this case. But I will show you in a moment how you can use some other custom formatting if needed. So again, in this one, we combine our search key, so first and last name, and then this looks very similar to the one above. We just took out that blank space. On our final one, we're searching this first column here. And so let me go ahead and just hide these real quick. And so what we're looking for is the date and the name, and then we want to return that rep. What we have here now is something that looks a little strange. So we have this text function inside of our VLOOKUP. So let me first of all show you why we need this. And the rest of the formula should look fairly plain and easy to parse. So let's pull this out here. Equals and our formula. So there's what we're searching for. 5225 Elijah Brown. And you can see that right here. And so we're returning Daniel, right? Now, let me show you what happens if we take this text function out of here. So now what we have is 45779-Elijah Brown. And so obviously that's not the same string, right? So first of all dates in Google Sheets are actually stored as numbers. And so let me just show you real quick. So there's the number that's actually getting displayed as a date. So I have another video on that in case you're interested. But for the sake of this video, we're just going to leave it at that. And basically just every date has an underlying number. And so if you watch here, 45779, if I change this to 3, you can see that just went up by 1 because every day is equal to 1 in this numbering system. So let me go back to 2 for the moment. So what we do here then is, since this is a number and this one's showing as a date, what we need to do is convert this number into a date string. So one thing before I do that is, if you have dates over here in a single field and you're doing something like searching 2 columns with 2 keys in this method, you don't need to do anything fancy, because just like this is a number ultimately at the end of the day, if you have a number in your data over here, you don't need to do anything because it's searching for example, in this case, 45779. And then over here, when you combine it, it's also going to do 45779. And so in that case, it will be the same. Now, where you have to do something different is when on one side or the other, it's part of a string. So maybe you have some complicated strings over here and you're trying to combine, maybe not just in this case 2, but maybe you have 3 or 4 and you're trying to combine all of them. And so one of them is a date or something special formatting. You may need to use this text function. And so let me show you how to use this text function. So we're just going to wrap our cell reference with that, and then comma, and then here we can do a double quotes and we can find our format. So in this case, an uppercase M is for our month, and then a D for our day, and then YY for our 2-digit year. And so there we go. Now we have the same as that. Now, one thing to be careful of is to use the same format that you're using in the data. So now we're searching for 5/2/2025. And you'd think, again, that would be the same, right? But this isn't searching for a date. It's searching for this string. And so in this case, it's not the same as our Elijah Brown over here, unless this was stored as a 4-digit year. Now you can see that it's working correctly. So just be careful and mindful of that you're using the same data formatting when you go to use this kind of formula. All right, so that is it for today's video. Make sure to check out the other videos on our channel for more tutorials on both Google Sheets and AppScript. And as always, have a great day.